Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the second episode of Flacki'S Day Off. Today, our special guest is Perry. Perry, say hi.
Hello. Hello.
You could just, talk a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself.
Okay, cool. Well, my name, Perry Kent Nielsen Jr., is who I am. I am a junior at UF studying biochemistry. I'm pre-med, so I want to get into medical school. Fingers crossed, who knows where and when. Let's see, I'm from Colorado, and I came down to Florida for school, so I'm a bit of a tourist down here. So I'm just trying to every single year it's a bit of an adjustment trying to get used to the weather and the heat. Literally I had to get a whole new like wardrobe when I came down. Like, okay, shirts, like this shirt is like super thin and it's like nice to wear outside, but the shirts I had back home were like these thick, super thin. And yeah, I like exercising. I like making and cooking food. Um, and I like movies a lot. So that's kind of. Oh, and also I'm the service chair of the Florida district at CKI. That's
Well,
kind of why I'm on the podcast.
yeah, so Perry's our service chair, and that kind of gives you guys a little bit of a clue what we're talking about today. We're just kind of talking about how to deal with service and COVID and just anything that we can do from home or social distancing. And I actually I don't have that in common with you. I am from Dominican Republic, so it's like even hotter than this. It's really
I
bad.
can't I cannot imagine that. That I can't even go outside. I'm just like, ugh. I just recede back into the house.
The coldest it gets there is like 70 degrees.
It's insane. Like I love sweaters. Like I love layering like jackets and stuff like that. That's like such a bummer about like these hot places, these hot climates, because it's like I've got so many cool jackets and I only have like 10 days to wear the jackets.
I bought some like cool jackets just in case. I had that chance to go somewhere cold and get out of this Florida
Yeah,
heat. But they're probably just gonna stay there for years because it's like it's not gonna get cold in here anytime soon.
yeah. Well, you just have to move away and try going someplace cold. Move to Wisconsin. Go crazy.
I would love to live in Wisconsin just for that 70 shows. Have you watched it?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of clips on like Instagram and YouTube, like edits of them. So
My
it's got like Topher Grace, Mila Kunis. They're
Yeah.
like big names. Like I know everyone that's in it. I just haven't seen the show.
I mean, you're not gonna see it now. It's off Netflix.
Oh, sad. I'm sure you can find it somewhere.
But like my whole my computer like laptop thing, you know what I'm talking about? Like the case. It has like a bunch of
Hmm.
Stat 70 Show stickers. I'm like a really big fan of it. That's how I learned how to speak English, watching it.
Really, that's super cool.
That and Two
Did
and a
they,
Half
did they
Men.
have like subtitles?
No, I just had to like figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah, that and also Two and a Half Men. I learned how to speak English, which are like not
Really, I'm
appropriate
sorry about that then.
shows.
Yeah, that's like I'm surprised you're not like speaking like Charlie Sheen does, like just with that like weird hard accent, like really angry and aggressive all the time.
I was like 9 too, so these are not like appropriate at all. They make the jokes and I
I
honestly I didn't get them, and now I get
I
them.
like I don't know if Two and a Half Men is appropriate for me. I'm 20 years old and I'm like that's an adult show. I'm like I don't want to watch that. Put on the cartoons, please.
Yeah, I don't know how my parents never were like, "Hey, you probably not do that. Like, you need to stop."
That's fine. You know what? We all got to grow up at some point. You just
Yeah.
had to grow up a little bit quicker than everyone else.
All right, so let's dive right into planning service projects. That's honestly probably the funnest part for me is like when I go to like a service project or wherever
Hmm.
I'm planning it, just going to Target and making my list of everything that I need. So like, how do you go about planning a service project? What do you think is like the most important part?
So I'd say, I mean, just like the whole thing is pretty important, but it's like keeping your eye on like the focus and the aim of the service that you're doing, I think is kind of like in a broad sense, what you want to keep hold of throughout the whole process. But like kind of on a smaller scale, on a more tangible scale, just making sure that you have like that you're on time with planning it, that you make sure that you're like that you're taking all of the steps, like maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks ahead of when the event's actually going to happen, making sure that you have like rides, making sure that you know like where people are meeting and where they're going, making sure that you have like all the supplies that you need for the service project, and making sure that you're just in constant communication with the people that you're doing that project with is really important. It's just that like organization, because like if you're if you're just like a volunteer and you're going to the service project and there's not a lot of like that organization in place, you're going to be like less inclined to come back. You're not like, when you're a volunteer, you just want to spend the majority of your time like actually helping out where you can. So minimizing the amount of like administrative time while you're at the project, I think is really important.
I also feel like people think that a service project is a one-man job. Like planning the whole thing is just for one person. And it's usually either the service chair or the president or the vice president. Like it's like their job to find the place, organize the people, make the list of everything, budget for it. And I feel like that's a lot for one person. So I just feel like delegating when it comes to service project also like helps members feel engaged and feel like they're part of something other than just like going there and getting their hour signed or whatever. So I feel like that's kind of important.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's just like the more people that you have like helping plan the service, the more service that you can plan total. It's like, and yeah, you're right when you say like things get like overwhelming, because they definitely do. We're all in college and we have a lot that we're doing, but like making sure that like you're just spreading the tasks out in a way that like that makes it bearable for everyone, I think is really important. And then the other thing is like, I mean, if you've got like members that just are really hyped about service and they're coming with ideas, like let them roll with those ideas and let them plan their own projects. Nothing is like a more empowering feeling than being like a freshman on campus and feeling like you can take like charge in this like well established org and actually like make like have a service project on your resume by the end of the year. I like my freshman year, like I don't think I had anything on my resume by the end of it. Gained 10 pounds freshman year. So having so having an actual like having an accomplishment, being able to say like, yeah, I have the capacity to do this. Just like allowing your members to like take charge and plan their own things, I think is a really great way to get people hyped up about the club and just service in general.
I had actually a different experience than you when it came to his freshman. Yes, I did gain 15 pounds. That did happen. But I came in
Yeah.
like already president of my club.
You came into the club as president, unlike
Yeah.
me, who came into UF as a scared freshman.
Yeah, I mean, I came to as president because I met all the officers at a CLE, and my sister was like the chartering president. So she was like, here, have her. This is your new president. You're welcome.
Yeah,
The old one, like
nice.
the old president, like left in the summer.
Okay. Yeah, well, glad they had someone to step up then.
Yeah, so I came in like ready to like plan all this stuff and like plan the socials, the service project. And we have like a small club. It's growing now, but we had a relatively small club. So it felt like a lot just me doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Were you like, did you have like other members on your board who you could kind of like send stuff out to, or were you just kind of doing everything?
I mean, yeah, obviously I had my officers or whatever, and they're like really helpful. But I'm the type of person where I like to do everything myself, and I struggle with delegating because I'm like, I can get it done quicker, faster, and then I don't have to ask any questions, and we just do what I want, you know.
Yeah.
So I
Hmm.
feel like delegating is something that I've like learned throughout the years. I can't do everything by myself.
Yeah. Well, like how, just out of curiosity, how do you like delegate? Like, what's your your tips on delegating?
So we have obviously our like committee chairs or whatever. So they know like what their roles are, and then we have like monthly meetings, and then they tell me what they want from that month, how many projects we want to have, and we kind of plan them together. And then we go on the list, like, oh, you do this, I'm gonna do this, you do that, you kind of thing. So like
Yeah.
one of them is in charge of making flyers, the other person talks to the service organizations, another person like buys everything for the project, and then we all kind of meet together. So I feel like
Yeah.
delegating during the meetings rather than like through text or email or something like that is like the most effective for me.
Yeah. Well, it becomes chaotic when you're trying to do everything in like a group chat. And I think like being intentional about the way that you delegate is also important too. Because like if you just kind of make a committee to like plan a project, but you don't really specify, like it's kind of like in a group project. If you like get handed a group project, but you guys don't talk about like who specifically is doing what, one person's going to end up doing the whole thing by the end of it. So it's like making sure that there's like clear and defined roles is another important part. And that's like it's good that you're like that you do that in your club because that's like a good way to make sure it's running smoothly.
Yeah. And I just I think another thing that people could be struggling with is just finding sustainable service projects, and rather than just having like a service project to have a service project. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
find service projects in their community that actually helps their community. I feel like that's something that's like kind of hard during this time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're in the CKI circles at all, you kind of hear the word sustainable get thrown around a lot. And there's not like a super clear definition of sustainable that like I've found. But if I had to like wrap up sustainable, it's about like having your projects be be intentional and based in the community. Because there's a lot of work that you can do that's more global focused, where you're kind of maybe you're doing like free rice, where you're donating rice to people who are in need, or even like you can take like wash, where you're trying to raise money for UNICEF. But like but sustainable has like a focus on being community based and making sure that it's like actually improving the situation and the scenarios in the in in your community in the place that you're like set. um and it's like I think like a lot of service projects that like for some a certain amount that we do are like we're just trying to find ways to help, but kind of having like a I call it like a town hall. That's kind of what I've found is just like having people come in the community and come and give like a bit of a presentation about different topics, different struggles that are happening in your community is a good way to kind of refocus your service and figure out where you want to direct a lot of your service in the upcoming year. So maybe you want to learn about maybe some of the race relations, maybe the socioeconomic disparity within your communities. You can kind of have someone come over to present about that, and then based off of that, maybe you have like a couple presentations on that. You can open it up to the entire community, post it online, post it in like student group chats. And then after that, you can kind of say, all right, well, we've learned this, like this is an area, our community needs more houses and needs more low income houses for people who don't make a lot of money. So then you can say like, all right, well, let's start doing a lot more volunteering with Habitat for Humanity, and not just volunteer work with them, but educational advocate work where we're trying to get more grants from the government, and we're trying to fundraise more in other parts of the community. So stuff like that, being able to really identify where parts of your community are struggling, and being able to make service projects that intentionally try and address those problems. It was really interesting when I was kind of like researching sustainability in service, because they brought up this one example of like they were bringing up like the missions trips, kind of, like where you do a
Mhm.
missions trip and you go abroad and you try and like do volunteer work in maybe like a third world, like a developing country. And they were kind of talking about like, well, being maybe like that's actually not a form of sustainable service, because by like exporting, volunteers to that place, you're taking away like labor, actual like paid labor that like locals can actually do. And so you're having volunteers doing free work for, instead of like local people actually being able to earn money and like be able to afford housing and be able to afford food. So even good intentions within service can lead to the wrong outcomes. So being like just taking a step back from the service for a little bit and just thinking about the impact that your club and the work that your club does in the community, how those two are linked is a good way to kind of make sure you're doing sustainable service. Sorry, I just ranted for
No,
like
it's
5 minutes.
okay. Yeah, I think doing the community analysis is very important. I know particularly in my county, there's a lot of Title I schools and a lot of low-income families. So something that I really want to incorporate with my club is working with SLPs to just maybe educate or do some professional development with like high school students or middle school students, because I feel like they don't really have the opportunity to think beyond their circumstance. So I feel like that's something that I'm really like passionate about, and I do want to implement once, kids go back to school. So I feel like doing that community analysis is really important, and just to really assess, like, is what I'm doing gonna make an impact, or is this just a service log? Is just something that
Yeah,
I'm doing
exactly.
for an hour, So I think that's really important. How did this like pique your interest?
Yeah, well, I mean, advocacy is kind of a bit of a been resurgence of advocacy. A lot of more people are taking on a civic mindset, and kind of like trying to be more aware of problems that are afflicting the world. And so I kind of got swelled up in the surge of that, and now I'm knee deep into advocacy, and I couldn't be happier. Honestly, I really do love advocacy, and it's kind of that it's one of those things that you just like don't realize how big of an impact that you can have until you like just try and do anything that promotes advocacy at all. So like one really good way that our club's been trying to promote like advocacy, trying to do topics like that is actually creating like the graphics that you'll see on social media. Like maybe like people will put like Instagram stories. So like we wanted to talk about like recycling, and how like a lot of people have misconceptions about recycling in Gainesville, and like tips to make to encourage college students to recycle. So during a meeting, I gave a presentation. Me and Sarah Wen gave a presentation on recycling, and kind of your misconceptions that you have with that. And then after that, for a bit of like a service project, we had everyone go on to the website Canva and design their own Instagram post that describes one recycling rule that they found like particularly interesting or like captivated them, or they thought like would trip people up. So like maybe you can't recycle Starbucks cups in Gainesville specifically, for example, or you can't recycle pizza boxes because they're greasy. And so people would make designs, and then we like would post those on our story kind of, and actually like post them as posts, and try and get everyone in the club to repost them, and try and get that to be like a bit of like a social media push in the community to try and like get people to see that. And then like that post will lead them back to our club page, and that's a good way to get them into the club. And that's kind of like first steps with advocacy. So you can do that with like any topic, but then like pushing forward, if you want to start delving into like deeper forms of advocacy, what you can do is you can start meeting with local politicians and asking them about their stances on these issues, and trying to see if they'll actually like support causes that you care about. So say you want to um, push for cheaper housing in certain areas of your community. Well, then you can meet, like try and see if you could schedule a meeting with like your mayor, and then you could like during that meeting say, hey, what's your opinion on the housing situation in Gainesville, for example. And based off of that, you'd say, hey, are you willing to pledge to spend more money in making affordable housing for low income people. And that's just like one way that you can be an advocate. And you can also do that on a federal level, where you try and meet with Congress people, and you can like see if they'll pledge to support certain causes that you're talking about. And then like if they say that they will, then you can like hold them accountable to that and say on social media that they did say that. And if they go back on that, then you can say, hey, they went back on this thing that they told us. And that's kind of like where you can really make a big change, a really wide scale change. It's I was reading the interdisciplinary panel on climate change, that they're like kind of the global group of scientists that decide what what the climate crisis, like what the solution is and how we can try and be mitigating that. And it's really funny, like at the very beginning they say, um, you might like you might recycle all the time, and you might be riding your bike to work, and you might be doing all of these steps to try and live a greener, more sustainable life. But the real difference, the only way that we're going to actually save the planet, is if we can convince politicians to actually sign legislation that like holds big oil accountable and make sure that they're like limiting their emissions, like big oil and car manufacturers. So like, some of the bigger, larger scale changes that you can make as a club are in just making sure that your politicians are pushing for smarter legislation.
Yeah, I think I really like the idea about like the posters. I think that's really cool just to get those conversation starters and also to assess what your club members are passionate about. Because I feel like if it's
Yeah,
only your passions that are being like shown in your club, it doesn't, there's no, people aren't engaged in it and they're not interested in it. So I think it's really cool that you guys are doing that. How
yeah.
did this start?
How did this start? Oh my gosh, that's a story. Wait, okay, I just remembered there is one caveat about trying to talk to like politicians is as a nonpartisan nonprofit, CKI can't actually take specific stands on bills, on like proposed bills. So you can't say, hey, we want you to sign this bill, for example. You just have to say, we want you to push for legislation towards this cause. So as long as you're kind of general and more vague about your language, it's totally fine. But back to advocacy in our club. So I'm also vice president of UFCKI, and I remember one of the platforms I ran on last year was I wanted us to push more into advocacy and have more of like an advocating role in the community. So over the summer, we created an advocacy committee out of some of the members of CKI to kind of work on these projects um, ourselves. And then like as things went on, we realized that like the advocacy committee was kind of functioning like a little like too separately from CKI proper. So we decided to soft split the advocacy committee into its own organization, keep CKI, have them like work together on some stuff, and then we're currently working on creating an advocacy chair to lead some of our advocacy efforts within like CKI. But we still work together as like orgs like us, and we're called the Gainesville Political Action Committee now. And yeah, so we work together on stuff like that. And then like just in CKI, the board's been pushing a lot of like advocacy initiatives forward too. And then we're gonna pass it off to the advocacy chair to let them take reins on that. And like our goal with the advocacy chair specifically is for them to focus more on the international advocacy initiatives. Oh man, there's 5 of them. I hope I think there's 5. There might be 4. I have it pulled up. Childhood development, homelessness and food insecurity, environmental justice, and what's the last one? Mental health. There you go. Yeah.
Those are,
So having,
I'm sorry to
go
cut
ahead.
you off. Yeah, those actually align very well with the organizations that CKI works with. Is that what you guys based it
Yeah.
off of?
Well, what ended up happening is the advocacy committee like wasn't focusing as much on those and was focusing on other things like just other topics in general. And we wanted to kind of have our advocacy component of CKI more aligned with those topics, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, do you have any like suggestions? For example, if I want to like do this in my club, do you like recommend starting small, or like how do you think someone should go about advocacy if they don't have any kind of programs like this in their club and their club is relatively small?
Yeah. I think a key things about doing advocacy is have like small tangible, you want to have like overarching goals. Maybe you want to say like, hey, I want the government to increase the COVID-19 response in our community. Like we want them to increase like CARES Act funding. We want them to support more unemployment benefits for people who don't have jobs right now. So having that overall goal is good, but having smaller goals within that, I think is key. You don't want to like, with advocacy, you're not going to change the world in a day. You're going to change the world in years, like person by person. And you got to make sure that you're focusing on just like, all right, this week we want to push out just one pamphlet describing the unemployment rates and how that's affecting our community right now. And based on that, we want to draw like maybe 2 more members into the club, and then kind of teach them about that and see if we can get like one member to write an op-ed article for a local newspaper describing what's going on. And so just having like smaller goals that are focused on just education, awareness, and then just like meeting with politicians and members of Congress. That's kind of like the best way to go about things, is just make sure that you're starting small, and that your projects and your efforts to educate the community are tangible.
Something that like my club really wants to do and is planning for, I think, the spring semester, is we do want to have an advocacy panel and have like a couple of workshops of how to like advocate properly, how to contact local politicians and stuff like that. So that's something that like is in the work. And I feel like advocacy is very important. I feel like it is I feel like it's almost like our duty, our job, to just make sure that the things that we want are getting done and to really make the world a better place. I feel like that's what we're all in CKI for, is to create that impact
Yeah.
in the world. And it's obviously not going to happen overnight. Things are not going to change overnight. So I think it's really important just to start small and just maybe, I don't want to say convince, but like make sure that like the ideas that you have are being presented, and you kind of push those politicians to, think about climate change, to support legislation about climate change, stuff like that. Because I don't know what's going to happen if
Yeah.
it doesn't get done.
Yeah. So yeah, the goal is to just make sure you're staying small but intentional. Like there's this one org at UF called CAPS, the Coalition Against Prison Slavery, and they're trying to end UF's contract with some prisons out here where they're not paying the prison workers enough, and they're like the wording of the 14th Amendment kind of gives a little bit of leeway for making prisoners, being like saying that you can't force anyone to do work unless they are prisoners, unless they committed a crime. So anyways, they're trying to get them to end the contract, and UF like still hasn't done it, even though their petition's gotten like 14,000 signatures. But even though that UF like hasn't canceled their contract yet, 14,000 people have still seen that petition. 14,000 people are now more educated on prison slavery in general, and kind of the negative effects that has on people who get released from prison, and the negative effects it has on like the families of prisoners and just in their communities in general. And so any advocacy work that you do is a win, because as long as one person sees it, one person is a little bit more informed about things that are happening out there. So the goal is to just make sure that you're just making a small difference, and from small differences, the ball gets rolling and big differences happen. But it's cool, because I think most of advocacy, other than like direct rallies and like protests, can happen, on an online basis. You can always phone bank. You can just design a graphic and say, hey, on this day, we're going to be calling, I don't know, the president of our college, asking them to lower tuition rates for online classes. And then you just send that out to as many people as you can. You ask everyone to send it to one other student, and then everyone calls the office. And then like they hear that there's a big push for lower tuition rates. So stuff like that is stuff that can happen online. It was happening online before the pandemic even happened, and it can continue happening online. And like meeting with politicians, I mean, they're hardly ever like actually in your area. So being able to just schedule a Zoom conference with them, meet with them online is good too. And so, yeah, like social media advocacy is good, but taking it one step further, translating that to a more sustainable form of service is good. Service in the COVID world is kind of kind of hard, and I think that's something that we've all been kind of struggling with. Just trying to find forms of service that actually engage people, and it doesn't just feel like monotonous online work. Um, so like I don't know, the old service chair Robin made a really impressive guide that you can find on the Florida District of Circle K International website. It's called the 2020-2021 Service Guide. But just some of like a bit of like a summary that I've made from it is there's like kind of three types of projects that I can envision people doing right now. So there's like really easy and simple forms of online service, and those are really good ways. So I'm talking about like your free rices, where it's like you're just playing a game and you're like earning something for like people somewhere. You can like volunteer with the Smithsonian where you help them transcribe documents. It's not sustainable in the sense that like it's local, because it's more like you're just helping someone out there with a project that they need help with. But it is more engaging in the sense that like you can talk to people while you're doing the service. um you can kind of like talk to them about the club, you can introduce them to members. It's like it's more of a social kind of service, if that makes sense. But then like going on to some of the other types of service, you've got like more engaging forms of virtual service. And I would say that that's like those are your town halls, where you're really trying to do a form of service that really engages the community and focuses on the community. So that's where you're inviting people to come talk about disparities in the community, or you're having like I mean something that Alexia Walker is doing in GPAC, in the Gainesville Political Action Committee, is she's scheduling this event where we're having a couple of different faculty come to talk about racial demographics in Gainesville, and they're having like a friendly debate. They're like having a debate, and she's trying to make sure that she finds tenured professors who aren't going to get like fired for anything that they say during this, but they're going to talk about kind of the racial situations in Gainesville, and kind of how they might relate to socioeconomic disparities. So that's another kind of town hall that you can do. um, Other forms of like more long-term and sustainable forms of services, like tutoring kids, having like a tutoring program, or having like long-term pen pals, where you're like writing to someone and you're making sure that they're staying happy and healthy in the pandemic. And like for pen pals, I mean more towards like elementary students, or towards elderly that are in nursing homes. And then like everything I talked about with advocacy is definitely like a sustainable form of service, because it's literally focused on your community, and it's something that you can just repeat throughout the years. And then kind of dipping into more more in-person events. It's tricky to do things in person, because for the most part you can't really be next to someone else, and you can't like you don't really want to be using the same sort of supplies. But doing like some kind of campus or park beautification is always a good option, because everyone can stay spread out, and you can kind of talk and have conversations while you're trying to clean up some trash. um, this is kind of an extension of advocacy, but kind of hanging up signs around town, and posters and some of those graphics that you might make, and trying to just educate the community on different topics. Maybe having like being those annoying petitioners that you walk by, like staying there and saying like, hey, have you heard about this topic and do you want to learn more? I mean, you don't even have to have something that they have to sign. You can just be trying to educate people like that. um, Building a community garden is a really good option, that you can stay distanced, and it's like that's like I mean, that's like the most engaging thing, I think, is just like being there and actually like having a tangible product of your service. You're like, now there's food that the community can eat. I mean, there's that definitionally is like improving your community. um, let's see, something that touches on advocacy. If you can tell, I really like advocacy. Is volunteering at the polls, and trying to help people. Well, not help people, just like making sure everyone's voting and helping people like get registered to vote. Doing stuff like that is good, because everyone should do, as you were kind of talking about, their civic duty, and make sure that they're educated on who's running in elections, and voting on someone who's going to represent them well. And then kind of like the last form of like in-person service that you can do is having some kind of drive-through, maybe like a food drive or like a clothes drive. What you do is you like advertise it. Um, you'll advertise it really hard for like a couple of weeks, and you'll say, hey, on this day we're going to be here collecting canned food, or we're going to be collecting old clothes, and then being able to donate that to people, and going around and making sure that like maybe you're putting up flyers or like passing out flyers in the neighborhood, or maybe you're like making sure that you're messaging other orgs and making sure that they're aware that that's happening. Messaging your Kiwanis clubs and seeing if they can spread that around their neighborhoods, send that to their HOAs. That's another really good form of in-person service. It's just trying to stay, I'd say the focus right now is trying to be engaging and sustainable. And if you can't do both, make sure you're sticking with one, because non-engaging, non-sustainable service is kind of where you drift into like not really helping your community and not really helping your members either develop themselves personally. So you got to make sure you're helping someone out there with the work that you're doing.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
I mean, not coming because you didn't
Yeah,
like
of course.
personally talking to
Well,
me.
yeah, of course. It was a lot of fun.
Well, if anyone has any questions about service or advocacy, you can, contact Perry. Perry, what's your information?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me at service@floridacirclek.org. Wait, let me make sure that's right. Oh my gosh, now I'm panicking. Okay, yeah, you can reach out to me at the email service@floridacirclek.org. Should I mention my phone number? Is that
If you
something
feel
people usually do?
comfortable, I mean,
Yeah. I mean, like, please don't harass me. But if you like, if you just want to like get in contact and learn more about, I don't know, service and or advocacy, or you just want to talk about movies or something, you can reach out to me. My phone number is 970-391-8012. Please mention who you are and that you're in CKI, so I don't just think you're some random texting me.
yeah,
So
and
I'd
also
appreciate that.
also mention that it's because you listen to the podcast. I feel like that would help you.
Yeah, maybe mentioning that you listen to the podcast, that give me some context as to where you're hearing this from.
Yeah, thank you so much for, having this chat with me. I think these are very important topics that will, help
Yeah.
our members stay engaged and just giving back to our community. If anyone else has any other questions, you can reach me at education@floridacirclek.org, and I will not give out my phone number.
That's fine. You know what? You don't have to. It's fine.
Just because I'm really bad at replying anyway. I check my email more than I check my text. I don't know why.
No, I think I do that too, but I don't know. I'm all about that personal connection, phone number. I don't know. I bet just please don't harass me. That's my only request.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, you can also submit them to our Instagram page. It's Florida Circle K?
Yeah, I mean, if you just look up Florida Circle K, we'll come up.
Yeah, you'll find us.
Yeah.
And you can also just comment on our YouTube videos on the comment bar or anything. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. And yeah, this is Flacki'S Day Off.